Experience, discover, and connect to Australian culture and landscape at the Luxury Lodges of Australia. These lodges are set in diverse, purposeful places across the country, and each one is special. Learn what makes them unique and how best to combine them in this discussion with Antipodal Representation.
Welcome to Paper, Ink, and Passports Travel. We haven't done these videos in a while, but today I'm thrilled to be talking to Libby Cooke from Antipodal, which represents the Luxury Lodges of Australia. Now, you guys know I love Australia, and Libby and I actually have a lot of background in common, but I'm going to let her introduce herself and the Luxury Lodges before we jump into conversation. Libby, thanks for joining.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks for having me. And yes, it's amazing how our career trajectories kind of intersect one another. I think we both have the same passion. I started my representation company about 8 years ago. My cornerstone client is the Luxury Lodges of Australia, which at that time was just forming, and now they're 10 years in the marketplace. But essentially, it's a collection of 19 independently owned and operated lodges, camps. We have a wilderness ship that showcase these authentically Australian regions, providing a connection, a very clear sense of place. So each one is magnificent. You and I chatted about a few of these, so we'll kind of touch on a couple of them and create a little bit more kind of exposure for them. They're all gems.
Yeah, I mean, just even the website, sitting there looking at the website, I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to go here, I want to go here, I want to go here. For a lot of my clients, and probably a lot of people watching this, you know, Australia, the big draw would be Sydney for a lot of people to see the Opera House and the harbour, Uluru or Ayers Rock, as people might know it, and the Great Barrier Reef. So Sydney Rock and Reef, that's kind of the traditional, the old school itinerary, I think I might say, because actually most of the itineraries I do for Australia also include Tasmania, Melbourne, Adelaide, Kangaroo Island. Got some people going up to Darwin, and well, it's going to be next year now. And then of course Western Australia is it's kind of its own destination in its own right. It can be combined, but there's also a lot to do out there on its own. But I think, you know, early on when you and I were talking about this call originally, we talked about, well, let's look at, you know, Sydney Rock and Reef, but let's look at how do we twist that up? And I think you've got some great ideas.
Yeah, there's definitely ways to kind of update that. That's what we would consider an iconic itinerary, one that absolutely stands up and is some of the highlights of Australia.
Oh,
but
absolutely.
There's definitely ways we can kind of innovate it, and starting with longitude 131. I mean, that's unparalleled views of Uluru, Ayers Rock. It's the spiritual heart of Australia. It is really an opportunity to better understand the Aboriginal culture. It's the most sacred, and an opportunity to better understand their beliefs and their traditions. So including a visit to the rock and a stay at longitude provides that Indigenous connection. Then for rainforest, of course, we've got Silky Oaks Lodge, located just outside of Port Douglas in the Daintree Rainforest. So taking you to kind of tropical North Queensland. It's also a bit of an adventure capital, and using Silky as your base camp, you can explore the rainforest. You can have a day trip out to the Great Barrier Reef from Port Douglas. You can explore Cape Tribulation, but we also have the local Indigenous culture there, the Kuku Yalanji people, so we can layer in Aboriginal, Indigenous. So Silky really becomes its own rainforest reef Indigenous experience. But again, it's showcasing reef. Typically you think Great Barrier Reef as you're situated up just outside of Cairns and Port Douglas, but we also have a couple other reefs that are within the Luxury Lodges, or properties I should say, that showcase reef. Taking you out to the west coast, South Sallis is located on the Ningaloo Reef, which is quite an alluring destination. It's definitely bucket list. It's one of the most remote within Australia. It's the most remote luxury lodge, and it's located inside Cape Range National Park. So many of these luxury lodges provide an exclusivity of access. You would not be able to explore and experience this part of Australia without the lodge being located there. So, and there's a privilege of place when you're staying at these lodges too. Those moments when you've traveled and it just kind of, you have that connection, that you feel the overwhelming gratitude, just to have that experience, right? So, so the Ningaloo Reef is an opportunity. It's where the outback meets the reef, and by day you can go hike the gorges and see rock art and emus and Euro kangaroos, and then you can pick up a snorkel and do a drift snorkel right in front of South Alice.
Oh,
Yeah, it's a glamping experience, but it's the true bucket list is when the whale sharks migrate through from April to July, and then the humpbacks for August to October. So opportunities to swim with some magnificent creatures.
yeah. Well, and sorry to interrupt you, but
No.
actually just this week I was on a trade show with Southern World, who really focused on Western Australia. And so the Exmouth dive people were there discussing what it's like to be out with the whale sharks and the humpbacks, and then how to pair that with a stay at South Alice. And I think the Journey Beyond guys are also connected with that as well. So really some great ways to tie in, that part of the country, which is definitely on my bucket list. I want to swim with humpback whale. Like, I've done the whale sharks in Mexico. Humpbacks are so high on my list.
Yeah, it's next level for sure.
Yeah.
And so again, such a remote part of Australia. The reef, it's a fringing reef, so it comes within a couple 100 meters from the beach, from the campsite. So it's amazing biodiversity, and it's healthy and it's vibrant. And so Ningaloo Reef is definitely kind of has this allure for people that want to travel a little bit deeper, go off the grid. The last reef system we have to offer for our kind of rock rainforest and reef concept would be the world's most southern coral reef, and that's located on Lord Howe Island, out in the middle of the Tasman. That's about a 2-hour flight from Sydney. We have a small property called Capella Lodge, and that is a stunningly beautiful island. It's almost resembles like a Bora Bora. Small property, 9 rooms, but an amazing island to explore. So hiking and beach combing. But again, the world's most southern coral reef. So a good suggestion, especially for the early part of the year when the Great Barrier Reef is in its wet season and storms can come through up north. Lord Howe Island is far enough south. We're subtropical. There's no box jellies, or we're far enough offshore. So just a great alternate. And it is this perfect kind of idyllic, beautifully isolated island. It's pretty much where we all want to be going to kind of rejuvenate and take. It's that beach house, that beach feel, barefoot, understated. So Capella Lodge is another kind of draw, big bucket list item. A lot of Aussies love Lord Howe.
Great. Yeah. And another big draw to Australia, of course, is the food and wine. I know that all of these lodges have fantastic chefs, fantastic wine lists, but there's also a big draw to going out into the wine regions of Australia. Every single state has a wine region, is that right?
Yeah, every except for probably Canberra, which is territory, but yes. Some of them are a little bit more significant than others.
Yeah, sure. I mean, most people here have probably heard of the Barossa Valley outside of Adelaide, possibly McLaren Vale outside of Adelaide, Hunter Valley, of course, outside of Sydney, the Yarra Valley outside of Melbourne, and then Margaret River outside of Perth.
And we have a number of our lodges are what we consider culinary destinations, where the food and the wine is the draw. Now, all of the lodges, as you know, within Australia, it's not something just to be farm to table, or that's just how they just source locally. They just they eat seasonally. This isn't a thing for them. This is their own ethos. Now, but a few of our lodges pride themselves on the connection and that culinary experience. So there's ways we can layer the lodges together, and you can literally, for your foodies, go from lodge to lodge to lodge to lodge,
You're
which would be amazing.
going to be rolling out of Australia.
Yeah, pretty much. But again, what all of these luxury lodges provide and create is a connection to the community and to the people and to the environment. So you feel that connection. That's where these lodges provide that sensory connection. And yes, they're a culinary destination, but it's about exploring the Margaret. Yes, you're coming to Cape Lodge in the Margaret River, but please allow, a 2 or 3 night stay. So by day you can not only enjoy the tastings at some of the local vineyards, but you can also take a picnic on the Cape to Cape track, or go and explore the caves, or the Kerry Forest. It's each of these. It's about exploring the destinations as much as enjoying the culinary. And when I say they're culinary destinations, these are uh, let's see, at Lake House in Dalesford, we have a full masterclass kitchen. There's opportunities to go forage for the morels and come back. It's a 2 chef hatted restaurant, which is kind of like that Michelin rated. In the Barossa, there's opportunities for you to custom wine blend or custom perfume blend. That's something new. You can have breakfast with the kangaroos. So it's always about the experiences and how these lodges introduce these regional experiences to you. So each one is my favorite. It's the one I'm at is usually the one. But culinary wise, they all deliver. A few of them are set within either food producing regions, or vineyards.
Okay.
Yeah, it's exciting.
All right. Yeah. And another destination, and I know we're kind of talking broadly across Australia, but a destination that I think gives you a lot of that in one place is going to be Tasmania. There's great food and wine. There's also the unspoiled landscape. And you've got a lodge there, right?
Yeah, we've got Sapphire, Freycinet. So you're absolutely right. Tasmania has come on the scene maybe a couple of years ago. It's still that emerging kind of destination. There's the allure for that as well. Because it's its own island, it hasn't developed like mainland. It's a stay in Hobart, the capital. Did you venture down there when you traveled through Australia?
I haven't been to Tassie yet.
Good.
I love to go. Yeah, I've got some friends that have been, and I send clients. So I know a lot about it, but
Okay. Well,
yeah,
it's waiting. Yep, it's waiting for you. You got to keep it
I
on.
know.
Got to keep it on the list. So Hobart has its own character. It's almost like a fishing village. It kind of reminded me of like one of the Outer Hebrides of Scotland. It's
Oh,
very
awesome.
relaxed. It's very chill.
Yeah.
But then you have everything from the Mona Art Museum, the Museum of Old and New Art, which is super eclectic and a little provocative. You've got Port Arthur, so the prison camp. There's so much history. There's also, you mentioned the food and wine. There's a whiskey trail. So
nice.
the environment within Tasmania is very similar to kind of northern Scotland. Same kind of climate, which provides some with a wonderful producing kind of whiskeys, but also the cooler temperature wines. So the Pinot Noirs are gorgeous. They also have a sparkling wine. So the food and wine scene is very different than the mainland of Australia. Now, Sapphire is located 2.5 hours north of Hobart, so an easy add-on. So a couple nights in the city and then come up to Sapphire for a few nights. This is our coastal, it's up on Coles Bay outside of Freycinet National Park. Stunningly beautiful, unspoiled landscape. It's raw, it's remote. It's similar to like a New Zealand backdrop as I think Australia gets. That's
what I've heard about Tasmania. That's very similar. If you liked New Zealand, if you're super outdoorsy and love the South Island, Tasmania is great. And it's so funny that you bring up Scotland because, oh, my phone is ringing. It's so funny you bring up Scotland because I have said, I lived in both countries, New Zealand and Scotland, and I have said for years that they are so similar to each other. Scotland doesn't have the wine, but it's got the whiskey and it's got the landscape and so yeah, totally agree with you.
All right, well, you're gonna experience it for yourself because there's a great connection there when you're down in Tasmania. when you're at Sapphire, you're overlooking Freycinet, Coles Bay, as I mentioned, but it's the Hazard Mountains that are forefront. They are made out of pink granite. When it's sunrise, sunset, the lighting on them is magnificent. Again, it kind of speaks to your soul. It's we have a full range, over 20 inclusive activities offered at Sapphire, from a whole variety of hikes and walks. One, the most signature, is to Wineglass Bay, which is usually the Tourism Tasmania iconic, perfect crescent-shaped beach.
Yeah, I've seen the pictures.
So that's a walkable or hikeable from the property. But we also, I think, signature experience would be to venture down to the oyster farm and literally put on the hip waders, the fly fishing waders, walk out into the oyster beds, and then, unbeknownst to you, your guide pulls out of his backpack the white tablecloth, the cut lemons, the dipping sauces, the Tassie bubbles, and then reaches down and pulls the oysters, and you're having an oyster and champagne tasting right then and there, surrounded by pure air and pure light and pure water. Yeah. It's just again, quite a sensory experience. It's that connection where you feel a part of the destination.
Yeah, and I think that's key for Australia, because that's what it is. It's for me, traveling is all about the experience, and I love when the accommodation just adds to that experience.
Right, and each one of these lodges, it's core to their DNA to provide that very clear connection, and it might be outback or rainforest or reef or indigenous or food and wine, wildlife. There's so many experiences that Australia delivers. Again, the country is as big as the US. So yeah, that's where your expertise comes in looking at the season, and let's not run yourself all over the country, but let's concentrate in a particular area, but layer the experiences. And that's
absolutely. I think for most of my clients, most of the viewers here, going to Australia is a minimum of a 2-week trip, just because it's so far from us up here, especially those of us here on the East Coast. You're familiar with that too. It's like a 30-hour trip down, but it's really about combining a lot of different parts of Australia. And I think I said this at the beginning, Western Australia, in my opinion, it's really its own destination, because it's got the wine region, it's got the city, it's got the reef, it's got the outback, and you can combine Perth and Margaret River with Adelaide, or even Sydney with the trains, or of course flying. But unless you are giving yourself 6 or 7 weeks, it's really hard to do Port Douglas and Sydney and Melbourne and Tassie and Uluru and Western Australia.
That's it. Yeah, you have to take a look at the amount of time. Again, you have a great understanding where these 19 luxury lodges are located, to knowing that these are the products that will provide that the experiential. It's basically high-end experiential. We don't really call it experiential luxury, because luxury is so interpreted these days, but yes, you can understand that. For example, around Cairns, we have Silky Oaks, as I mentioned, up in Port Douglas. We have Mount Mulligan, which showcases outback, and then we have Lizard Island. So you could do a rainforest reef outback, all staying within the kind of Queensland, North Queensland area around Cairns. So there's there's ways to kind of combine in South Australia, starting at the Louise and the Barossa, venturing up to Aqaba and the Flinders Range, which is amazing, very accessible outback, and then a flight down to Kangaroo Island. Southern Ocean Lodge is being rebuilt. That was a tragedy, but aiming for a late 2022 reopening. So you could do a wine outback wildlife combination. That's South Australia's big tagline. So yes, you're right that there's ways to showcase a lot of layers, a lot of experiences.
I don't know what he's heard. Just scared me.
He didn't like the wine outback wildlife.
No, I don't think so. He's a New Zealand boy.
There we go.
It's I love that combination of staying near kind of and not to offend any Aussies who are watching this, but the second cities of
Mhm.
Australia, being Adelaide, being Cairns to an extent. But you really can do that and really focus in that area. And from the US, you can fly LA to Brisbane, so you can get that city vibe there and then just take a quick hop up to Cairns. Or if you felt like road tripping it, rent a
Mhm.
car. It's a long drive, but it's doable. And there's a couple like small town stops along the way. I have a lot of clients who love to self drive.
Awesome.
And then you could also do that with Adelaide, fly directly into Melbourne and then do that drive with the Great Ocean Road and,
Mhm.
cross through, what's that national park that's outside of Adelaide? It's just basically, I've driven through it. It's totally barren and flat.
Grampians, the Grampians.
No, I'm going to have to look on a map and I'll get back to you. I mean, it is just, you get out of Adelaide and it's just flat.
Wow. Okay.
And
No,
like,
that reminds me of like Cooper Pedy, but that's north.
that's north. Yeah. I want to say
And
it starts with a C, and somebody's going to comment on this and be
all
like,
right,
"You
good.
idiot!"
Bring it. Bring the ideas.
But I'll look it up on a map, and I'll tell you, and I'll put it in the comments when I get this video up. But you can do that. I mean, you're going to want to stop overnight between Brisbane and Cairns and Melbourne and Adelaide, but you can then really do that experiential stuff,
Absolutely.
like what you're saying, and then really get to see that one, South Australia or Queensland. And then if you want to combine Sydney in there on the way home and get that city experience and see the opera house and do the bridge
Bridge
climb
climb.
and maybe a harbor cruise for dinner, or gosh, even going out into the Hunter Valley or Blue Mountains for a couple of days before flying home. You can do that. And again, that really does fall into that 2 to 3 week time period. It's a lot of moving around, but it's totally doable.
It's absolutely doable. And again, you have, with your knowledge, having traveled yourself, you understand what it's all about, the size and scale of
Yeah.
Australia, and
Oh, absolutely.
how much time and how many days you should spend in Byron Bay or, along the way. So
Hmm.
it's absolutely doable. Love the idea of kind of slowing the pace down, focusing in a particular part of Australia, because it is regional. And
Hmm.
if you really want to better understand the people and the traditions and the culture and way of life,
Yeah.
that's where self drive is amazing. That's exactly what these lodges are creating. They're kind of infusing that destination into the entire kind of
Hmm.
experience or product, I guess.
Yeah.
So it's it's an inspiring. Australia's inspiring. I think that's what you and I kind of connected on, because of the range of experiences that it delivers.
Yeah. I love that you just brought up slow travel because I've been a proponent of slow travel for a really long time. And I think a lot of people don't understand what we mean when we say slow travel, because it doesn't mean like not going anywhere, like we've been doing here at home for I've been slow traveling through Pennsylvania. Um, but it really does mean focusing on one place and experiencing that one place. And I think the lodges are great for this too, because it doesn't also, you can slow travel through, say, Europe, and you can still knock off 3 cities in a week and a half or
Oh,
2 week period. I mean, and that's not the slowest of travels, but it's that leisurely day. It's getting up and having breakfast and then being like, well, what am I going to do? I'm going to do this. And, maybe taking a
right.
hike or meeting, with one of the foragers and going out and foraging for mushrooms, or, um,
Yeah.
grabbing your snorkel and going out just because you can. Um, in Europe, slow travel looks like waking up in Paris and sitting at a
Oh,
cafe for 3 hours, right? I mean, and then maybe going on a walking tour or visiting the museums or whatever. But it's slow travel is not packing your day full to the point that you are exhausted at the end of it and you get home and you're like, where was this picture taken? I don't remember doing this, because that's not what I want my clients to come home with. I want my clients to come home with the memories of, you know, getting into the water with the whale shark and just drifting on the surface of the water as this massive fish swims. I mean, when I jumped into the water after a whale shark, I practically jumped on top of the whale shark. I mean, like, that's how big these things are. And they're docile. I mean, they eat plankton. They're not going to go near a human. But that's what I want my clients to come home from Australia with, is those experiences and the people. And one of the things I like about Australia and New Zealand and Scotland too, you know, it's the people are so friendly and they want you to be able to talk about where they live and be able to go home and be like, I just had the most amazing vacation. I met the coolest people in Tasmania, or, you know, whatever.
Yep.
And I think when you're talking about the lodges, that's exactly what you're getting.
Yeah, the lodges, I think what you're saying with the slow travel, I like the word unscripted, where you have these unscripted moments. It's
Absolutely.
and that's a lot of times that allows for the connection to the people and that's like you said, that's exactly the lasting memories, that
Yeah.
the amazing guy you met at the bar or at the restaurant, or your waiter or your local guide, who invited you back to their house, you know, those types
Yeah.
of moments. That's why we travel. It's the connection.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so
And you
yes,
don't,
and in Australia it's even better with the Aussies.
yeah. I mean,
Pretty
I was
much.
just about to say, you don't, I know we're talking about the luxury lodges of Australia, but we're also talking about the destination. And I will say to clients and friends and everyone, you don't need to have a 5-star holiday to get these experiences. You just need to be out and doing something. And I'm going to tell you a really quick story, Libby, because I don't think you know this story. So I was backpacking through Australia, and I'd rented a car in Melbourne, and I was driving up the Sapphire Coast, which is that like coast between Melbourne and Sydney, like Lakes Entrance and Eden, and Narooma. And I was up there, and I had, oh gosh, like a rough guide or National Geographic guide or something. And it was describing, you know, they have the, like at Bondi with the icebergs where it's that natural pool. Well, they've turned it into a pool, but they have these natural rock pools all along that coast.
Wow.
And there was one specific one that I was looking for. And I went to the beach that it was supposed to be at. It was gray, it was kind of rainy. Well, I pulled into the parking lot, and there were all these people standing around, and they were standing probably in a kind of a sort of circle around a wallaby. And this wallaby did not look good. And someone was on the phone, and they were calling one of the wires people. Now, the wires people, for those of you who don't know, they're the wildlife rescue for New South Wales. They were big in the news with the fires back earlier this year because they raised a ton of money from celebrities to care for the wildlife. But anyway, they have these people who it could be you or me, Libby. It could be anybody who just wants to be an animal rescuer. So somebody called the number, and this couple came out, Beryl and Andy. And Beryl and Andy have a little sanctuary at their house. And so everyone else kind of scattered when this couple got there, but I was super curious. So I talked to them briefly, and they told me what they were going to do, which was how they were going to get this wallaby and take him back to their little sanctuary and see what needed to be done with him. You know, could they rehab him, or, you know, was he old and was he sick and was he maybe diseased, and whatever they were going to do. So they show me how they're going to get this wallaby, and they take this big sack, and because it acts like a pouch.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
They get this wallaby into the sack, they get him in the car, and then they tell me, why don't you come out and see us tomorrow? And they gave me a phone number. So I'm like, all right, amazing. So I go back to where I'm staying, and the next morning I get up, and I was very delayed in getting there because I actually had a flat tire, but that's a different story. But I get out there, and they have these 2 or 3 baby wallabies that they have rescued, that they are rehabbing, and then they are releasing them. and they do this regularly. And unfortunately, the wallaby that they had picked up the day before, they did have to euthanize because he was very, very, very sick. But I got to hold a baby wallaby, like I just like cuddling it. And these wallabies go like, you hold out the little pouch, and they make them out of old sweatshirts. It's really cool. They hold it out, and the little baby wallaby goes like rolling into it, because that's how you get into his mama's pouch.
That's amazing.
It's the coolest thing. And I actually still email with them.
That's really,
That
see,
was
again,
a couple years ago.
Awesome connection.
Yeah. I checked in with them with the fires. I wanted to make sure everything was, because they're in the Narooma area.
Yeah.
And they actually said they had been evacuated. And
Mm.
they had taken all the wallabies with them. But like, so I guess my point is, like, you have these amazing lodges in Australia, and certainly the experience of staying there in the 5-star, the 5-star luxury and all of that, with the high thread count and the amazing wine list and the amazing food, is unparalleled. But getting out into Australia and just having these experiences with the local people who are just living their everyday life, I mean,
that's it.
You can have that.
You can absolutely have that. With the luxury lodges, you'll have it. Again, it goes without saying that we kind of hold to those premium kind of luxury expectations.
Of course. Yeah.
But each of these lodges are interpreting luxury to be relevant to where they are. So when you're up outside of Darwin at Bomaroo Plains, you're in a 3-sided canvas tent, essentially on stilts, because it's all about the level of the water. It's a bit like a Botswana. And you tour by airboat, but the luxury is interpreted by the intimate wildlife connection up there, because you've got wildlife surrounding you. So, in others, the lodges are a little bit more of a sizzle, like a Qualia or Wogan Valley or Sapphire, where it's a little, it's pretty special, a little bit more glamorous, maybe a little bit more design oriented, but it is about the experiences and how these lodges connect you to the destination and the environment, and the engagement with the communities and the people, and the opportunities to be a part of all of the kind of the purpose for good, all of those initiatives with sustainability.
Yeah. And so, I think you and I, again, with our background with Lindblad, everyone interprets luxury differently. You said that earlier. Everyone interprets adventure differently as well. And I think you can have that super high-end adventure experience, going out during the day, coming home to, butler service and someone greeting you with your cold martini or whatever, like as you're walking back onto the ship or back into the lodge. Or you can have that super up close and personal experience with the wildlife or the indigenous culture, and still have that amazing experience with the service. But it's just slightly different. And I do think the luxury lodges of Australia have that, like you mentioned, kind of barefoot luxury at Lord Howe. Like, it's a little more casual, and Australia is by nature a lot more casual than we are here in the US, or say like, a Four Seasons in Paris is Australia's just much more casual in their entire culture. And so like that comes through in the lodges. And I can't wait to actually get down there and experience the lodges for myself.
I know. Let's put that on for 2021.
Libby, I'll be on that first flight to Australia after all the Aussies get home, because I know a lot of them are stranded.
Yeah, we need the world to reopen, but they're so excited to welcome all of us back. Although I must say the domestic Australians are nicely now traveling their own country, and kind of like we are here in the United States, kind of re-energizing with their own. So they're beautifully benefiting from the lodges. But yeah, we're waiting. The lodges are waiting for us.
Yeah. Well, and I think you and I will definitely get down there. We'll have a glass of wine and we'll go out and do something amazing.
And just feel that connection. So anyway, sir, you're lovely. Thank you for having me join you today.
Oh, thanks for joining me. This has been great to talk about Australia.
Well, it's an amazing, alluring, experiential destination for all of us.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
let's all go.
absolutely. Thank you so much.